So, Zach, I wanted to start the conversation today around sensationalism and how it's very difficult to have a nuanced conversation really around anything these days, but especially around marketing topics because everybody wants to be very extreme about these discussions. And we're going to talk SEO and search today, but most people, when you have this conversation, have to say something like SEO is dead versus SEO is changing. And I'm happy today that we are going to talk about SEO changing and not the fact that it is dead, because that is ridiculous.
Gabe, I feel like every year there's some new marketing or tech product that everyone thinks is dead, and this might just be the next version of that.
I think that's a great point. It seems, and plus I feel like it seems like a smart thing to say, like Google's gonna be dead and they're gonna lose all of their business, their core business, because of AI and SEO changing and things like that. And while it's an interesting talking point, like with most things in life, there is a tremendous amount of nuance that goes on underneath that. And that's really what we wanted to talk through today, was basically kind of peel some of the layers of that back. And I do think that a lot of this is going to change quite a bit over the next 12 to 18 months even, and probably longer term even more so. But it's not like something where we're just going to wake up tomorrow and Google is going to be gone and SEO is completely dead.
That's a great point, Gabe. And one of the things we've talked about in the past few episodes is AI. And on one of those episodes, we said AI is still new, right? Like, we've had ChatGPT for, has it been 12 months or has it been longer than that? I don't remember at this point.
I think it's 18 months. I want to say it was like October, November 2022 that it officially launched, I want to say, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
What have I been doing for the past year? But yeah, it's still relatively new. So when we talk about like how even AI is impacting SEO and Google and Bing, and is Yahoo still a thing? No, Yahoo's run by Bing, or the results. I think there's some partnership there, but
I think you're right.
As far as AI goes, it's still a very new integration, and I think as we said in that episode, we're just getting started.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's also there's a financial incentive for Google not to kill this business. So much of Google's revenue right now comes from clicks, those little blue links. So if people are not clicking, then how are they able to monetize this? And this is something, Zach, you and I were talking about actually earlier today, but there's got to be this transition, because they're not just going to completely kill their existing business to make the experience better for you and me. As much as we would probably love that, that's not the reality of how this is going to go.
100%. And Gabe, we both have financial backgrounds. So when I look at this, I think, okay, AI is a resource intensive feature. It's not cheap to do. In Google's case, again, search is a big component of their business. It's where a lot of their revenue comes from. So when they integrate AI into their solution, or when they launch Gemini AI to compete with ChatGPT and OpenAI, they're not just going to flip the switch and transition. And one of the things Gabe and I were talking about was, has anyone seen ads on Gemini yet? Or have we seen paid results? And Gabe, I haven't. I played around with it a little bit today, but I haven't seen any paid results yet. And I think at one point Google was testing this or getting ready to test this, but it goes back to, it's not going to be a switch where we just go from, Google search into AI or however this looks. But one of the things we want to talk about today is, what are we seeing with SEO today, and what's happening with search, knowing that so much has changed in the past 12 to 18 months.
Well, and to that end, with this discussion around what does the future of search look like, I think it's really important to understand how much Google historically has dominated search. Google has been 90+% market share for a very, very, very long time. And what we're starting to see now, though, is actually that's shifting a bit. And Zach, I shared some stats with you that I saw on LinkedIn of all places, and then went on and did a little bit more research to dig into it in a bit more detail. But the statistic that was shown was that Google search traffic had actually shifted from, again, in that 90% range down to 78% as of April. And on desktop specifically, it had gone down to 67% of search traffic, with Bing being 21% of desktop search. With mobile, it's definitely more geared, more heavily weighted, obviously, towards Google. As we know, Google has the exclusive search capabilities on the iPhone. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with the fact that they still dominate on the mobile side. But I thought those numbers were fascinating. And when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry, a shift of 1 or 2 points is hundreds of millions of dollars that these companies may be seeing flow in or out of their coffers one way or the other.
It's very interesting to see, and I only know like one person who uses Bing, so great to be part of that statistic. You mentioned the mobile traffic too. I'm definitely iPhone user, but I use Google as well. Can't imagine using anything other than Google. But one thing we didn't talk about, Gabe, that I think is going to be interesting, specific to Apple, is they have been in talks with both Google and OpenAI to bring AI into Siri. And I think depending on what your search queries are, Siri, I have a love-hate relationship with this product. It's hot garbage. It surprises me that Apple uses it, but there's so much potential there. Like when you think of what you ask Google, what you ask ChatGPT, Gemini, Bing, Copilot, anything, just think about the results you get. They're typically very descriptive, accurate for the most part, but with Siri, it's you don't know what you're going to get. So when they integrate this with Siri, it'll be interesting to see if they choose Google, if they choose OpenAI. But it's going to be even more interesting to see what this shift does over the next 12 months. Anticipating next month with Apple's WWDC, they announced some iOS 18 AI features, and this fall we find out. But I think that's going to add to this shift and be this big unknown for the next 12 months.
That's kind of the exciting part, though, is that it is unknown. And that's, I think, the exciting part about this Google discussion and search discussion also, because we have seen the traditional model of search honestly isn't a great experience for an individual person. You search for something and then you get this big list of blue links, and we know well enough to understand how people try and get up to the top of that, because the reality is if you have to scroll down below the fold to, your customers probably aren't going to do that. But what's really interesting to me is how Google has started to shift from traditional blue links to featured snippets that they did a few years ago to now AI answers based on Gemini. And that's a much better experience for a person, because when you're searching for something, you're generally wanting an answer. You're not necessarily, obviously you go to search to buy things too, but you probably first and foremost, you want to get a general answer. And to go back to your previous comment, how do you monetize that if you're Google? Is it inserting ads into Gemini AI? Why is that hard to say? But is that putting them into Gemini, or are they going to have to monetize in some other way? That's the part that I think is so fascinating about this discussion.
It's very interesting, and the part I think of too is how does that change the results? Because right now, and I don't want to get into like the different like AI models, but Google Gemini is based off this closed model, so we don't fully understand how it's getting results or how it's coming to conclusions, which we can talk about today as well. But how do you slip an ad into the results? Or it's going to be interesting to see, again, over the next few months, how we start to see paid ads in different AI results. I think with ChatGPT, they have like a paid plan. I don't know what the price is off the top of my head, but you pay a monthly fee and there's different access to, I think, some online content. But as far as Google goes right now, specific to Google Search, Gemini, it's free and open to the public.
I will also say, I feel like just in my personal experience, I feel like the AI generated results when I do ask questions are getting pretty darn good, and have made it so I don't have to click any further to actually get the answer that I wanted to get. And that sort of leads us nicely, Zach, into another topic that we wanted to talk about, which was this idea of zero-click searches, which is something that has been on the rise. And I'd love to hear your perspective just on what that means and how we think that's going to, so these searches that are resulting in AI, from AI results are going to change those zero-click searches even further.
Yeah, and zero click. This is interesting, and basically what a zero click is. I mean, it's when you don't click the result. So when you search for something on Google, there was a statistic that said that 57% of mobile users exit without ever clicking on a paid or an organic result, right? So people don't even click on these links anymore. So what's happening is, and I have a few examples here and some use cases as well, but one of the ones I always see is, when I'm looking up like the cast of a movie or TV show, I feel like this is probably like my number one use case is like, who is, this person?
Who was in Hot Rod? But I know you know all the answers.
Okay, that's the example we will use. Who was in Hot Rod? Best movie of all time. And it's going to give you like the pictures and the names and some information, or you could say who was the lead actor in Hot Rod. It's going to give you Andy Samberg's name, information, age, social links, which I love too. I guess not so much for him. I love how I know that, but it's going to give you all this information that 10 years ago, which I feel like that might be 2 years ago, you'd have to click one of these links. You would have to go into the content, you'd have to go into Wikipedia, whatever the top result was, to find this information, and now Google's just displaying that. And this is great for a couple use cases. We talked about, celebrities and public information like that. Another one I think it's useful on is local businesses, finding out information about a local business. And this, again, ties into your Google My Business. So if you don't have a Google My Business, get one of those. I mean, you definitely want your information top of that page. But also things like calculations, conversions. Gabe, we have a lot of Canadian coworkers, so when I have to compare the different metric systems, I go straight to Google. But again, that's what that zero click is. It's when Google's displaying that information at the very top of the page, and you don't have to drill into that once you've landed on it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And again, that's a better experience for the user, but it's more difficult for Google to monetize that. And that's where I think you're going to start to see that shift of them is trying to either insert ads in there, or that's where it becomes even more important from an SEO perspective for as a company, your answers getting into those results, because then from a branding perspective, people see you as an expert and then are more likely to engage with you just in general. Maybe they're going to be more apt to go to your website directly or go search for your company directly. But if you can figure out a way to start to get into those results, either from an AI generated perspective or whatever, it's going to be beneficial for you long-term, because again, from a branding perspective, you're going to be perceived as that much more of an expert.
100%. One of the things, I feel like this has been the joke for the longest time, but I don't know if Google still has pages. I mean, if they do, that says something that I don't know that, but they always said, if you're not in the top 5-10 results, most people aren't going to go to that second page unless they're like really desperate to find whatever that information may be. No one's going to the bottom of the page or to the next tab. So keeping that information top of mind, top of the page, however you need to do that is vital to existing on search engines in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know we're gonna talk through some ideas that we have around how to make sure you're thinking about where this goes in the future. And to go back to the beginning of this conversation, it being a nuanced conversation, I don't think anybody has the answer here. We don't know. What we do know is things are going to change because of this. What we don't know is exactly how it's going to play out. And we have some ideas and some thoughts around things that, marketers can do to help themselves out as this moves forward. But it's impossible to know. It's impossible to know exactly how this is going to play out.
All we can do now is implement best SEO practices and adapt. That's going to be the key.
Yep. Well, Zach, can you talk us through just a little bit around how Google has changed some of these new terms? SGE is an acronym that's getting thrown around a lot. I know we all need more acronyms, like we need a hole in the head, but it seems like a pretty important one. I'd love to have you just go through that one in a bit of detail to help people understand what that is.
Yeah, SGE. So that is specific to Google here, search generative. Gabe, we always struggle on that
generative is just a tough word. I don't know why that one is so hard.
Search generative experience, SGE. That's why they have an acronym.
Yes.
And And this is when Google is bringing in some of that AI component into Google search. And it's great for finding answers, summarizing key takeaways, and even doing how-to instructions. That's something we've talked about here in the past. And one of my favorite examples is Zion National Park. If I'm looking for hiking trails, I can just go to Google and I can say, what are the best hikes in Zion National Park? And in the past, I would get all these links and I wouldn't know which one to click. So I'd be on page 1, page 2, I'd just keep going down. I'd be on the All Trails app. I'd be all over the place trying to find these best hikes. What I have now is Google creating a, I don't know what you want to call this, like a little page where it's taking in results from these different websites, All Trails included, and it's telling me what the best hikes are. It's including photos. It's giving me information. This is a challenging hike. This is an easy hike. Here's some information, the best time to do it. All of this without leaving that Google site. It's bringing in, again, all this information from those blue links and creating a plan. And it does this with recipes as well. I've seen people say like, oh, what's a chocolate chip cookie recipe? And there it is. And there's all kinds of different ways they've done this. For me, hiking results is the best use case I've seen so far.
Well, this brings me to something I meant to mention earlier and I forgot. So this is a perfect reminder for me, which is reviews and Google reviews specifically and how those get integrated into the AI search results. I personally haven't seen reviews getting kind of like consolidated together and put into those AI search results. Have you seen that, Zach? I personally have not.
With the Google reviews, not so much.
Reviews from other sites, like you were mentioning, a trail site or whatever, where people are writing on there, they're definitely going to pull that information in. But I wonder if they will start to pull in those Google reviews at some point.
I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, they have access to the data. I haven't seen anything, but going back to my hiking example, they didn't have reviews. But what I'm thinking now is how awesome would it be if, I mentioned All Trails, I love that app. What if they started bringing in All Trails reviews and saying like, oh, this is what people are saying about this hiking trail. Another use case was I saw like vacation planning, like, kind of outlining your vacations. But I'm like, if we're doing that, could we start bringing in business information, eat here, visit here? There's so many use cases. And with Google having that information, either from Google Business, Yelp, I hate Yelp. There goes another sponsor. But, all of these other websites, bringing that information in, I mean, it all exists on the internet. I genuinely think there's a use case, and I kind of want to see it.
I wonder if that's how they start to monetize this going forward. I wonder if Google actually starts to shift to a paid model for a Google My Business. Right now, anybody can go on. We could have a Google My Business for the Buffering podcast if we wanted to. It's free. We could set that up. Anybody can have a Google My Business account for free. And as part of that, obviously people can go on and review your business. I wonder if they start to try and monetize that way by pulling those reviews into AI search and then actually charging people to have a Google My Business plan because they know that they're going to see a reduction in revenue on the search side for PPC.
Which is interesting because that actually leads into my next example. And that's when you have AI bringing in search results. Right now I can go to Google and I can say, what are the top 5 ISPs in my town? Right? Like that's standard enough. Google's going to give me a list. One of the things you can do now with the Google AI or even Gemini, which is kind of cool because on the Google app, before I get into this point, on the Google app, I don't know if do you use the Google app, Gabe?
I use portions of the Google app, but not all the time for everything.
At the top, there's like a little switch, and you can toggle between Google search, like just straight Google, and Gemini. Which I find myself using Gemini more and more doing that. I actually, so on my iPhone 15 with the action button, I mapped mine to Google. So when I hit this button, it opens up Google. Again, sorry, Stewie. But one of the things I've been doing is saying, hey, what are the top internet providers in my town? And with Google, it's going to show you that list. And with this new AI, it's going to bring in information like speeds, availability. When I did it just for this podcast, it even brought in technology. It told me which was the fiber provider, which obviously that's the one that's top of mind. And it also told me which is maybe like the legacy fixed wireless copper satellite if we have to go there. But it's bringing in all this information. So I didn't have to go to a single BSP webpage. The information was aggregated and presented. And you can do this with Gemini too. It's more contextual that way. But again, we're seeing how these AI systems are influencing search. And we're talking a lot about Google today. Gabe, have you ever played with Copilot at all on the Microsoft websites?
I have, and I played with it a lot when it first came out, and I was not wildly impressed with it, to be honest. It's definitely gotten better, and I think there's been some huge strides there. And frankly, that's probably why you're seeing some of that shift that we're talking about around, people moving off of Google search to Bing search. And what is the saying? I'm always terrible at these quotes, but I feel like Google kind of lifted some of what Bing was doing with those AI search results into their AI search results, much like Facebook classically does with any product that they're like, hey, that's cool. We should just steal that and put it in our platform. But I do think it's the reason why you're starting to see some more of that shift towards Bing. I wanted to make a comment really quick. We were talking about Google and Google My Business Profile. Zach, you mentioned this earlier too. If you don't have a Google My Business Profile, like pause the podcast right now, go set that up. But the other thing is set up a Bing profile too. So make sure that your business has a Bing profile. And if you have a Google My Business Profile, it's really, really, really easy to do. It's seriously like 5 minutes worth of work. And as we're starting to see the shift of people move from Google to Bing, it becomes even more important for you to have a Bing business profile too. And again, if you have a Google My Business Profile, it's like a couple of clicks and probably 5 minutes worth of work to set one up over there too. So apologize for the tangent, but
I have to add to the tangent though. You left off Apple Maps. Make your Apple business profile. That's right. Like, I don't know if you knew this was a thing. I had to build one out, but you can manage like your Apple Maps listings and your Apple business listings as well. Mm-hmm. So that's
another good one.
Yeah, just put your business everywhere, right? Don't stop. Get it on Yelp. Why not? But with these results, though, I think it's important to know that when you bring in AI, I would say you bring in an increased risk of inaccuracy. I mentioned Google's closed AI model, and Google and Microsoft both are very good at having their AI models answer questions, which is what they were built to do. But they don't really reveal how they made decisions or what decisions were made to get to that conclusion. Like when I'm asking what the best hikes are in Zion National Park, how is Google ranking those, right? Again, this kind of goes back to, could we bring in reviews or where's this information? We don't really have public visibility into how Google in this case is doing just that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough. It is a little bit of that black box, and that's where it becomes a little bit squishy to determine how exactly do I ensure that I start to rank in these things and actually show up as an authority, because it is, well, frankly, two things. It's new, and it is a little bit of that black box where you don't exactly know. So that's where, some of these suggestions we're going to talk through next, Zach. I think it's just about, these are things that are going to be beneficial for you from a traditional SEO perspective or from a generative experience perspective.
SGE, man, come on. That's why we have
SGE. That's why we have the acronym, so I don't have to sound like an idiot.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. Some of these best practices we've talked about already, and we've got a few we want to talk about here in a bit. Like, don't save them for AI. Like, implement them today, or implement them yesterday, and let's see some success. But I think that was a fantastic call out.
Yeah, it's going to be beneficial across the board, whether it's again for traditional SEO or this new SGE way of doing it. And the other thing that Google has really started to try and do is pull content forward that is more educational or more where it's helpful content, right? They had this big push around helpful content. And so to the extent that you can make your content helpful for somebody, that's going to be beneficial both, again, from an SEO and an SGE perspective.
Yes. And Gabe, when we started this podcast, you were talking about SEO and AI and SEO being dead, which I just love that.
It's so silly.
Yeah, but one of the things I think I just want to hit one more time is AI is not going to kill SEO, right? It's not going to happen. But what it will do is it will transform it. It will change SEO, right? And we have a few ideas here as well. But Gabe, I'm just thinking back, like, have we, not to put you on the spot here, but I'm thinking back, is there any other, similar situation where we thought AI or something was going to kill something, but instead it just transformed how we use it or how we go to market with the product?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of like a really good example where everybody started freaking out about, something just being completely dead. I kind of feel like we've been doing that with video and streaming services for a long time, where people have been, talking about how, Netflix and Amazon Prime are going to murder the traditional video business. And they've certainly had a huge impact, but there still are tens of millions of people paying for traditional video services. And, it's not a wildly profitable business, but it is still a business that exists and people are paying for. So I just feel like anytime a new technology comes along, everybody has to sensationalize it and, turn up the contrast. Zach, I don't know if you've seen, this is like a really recent example, but there's the rabbit product that has come out that's supposed to kill.
Oh my gosh, you better believe I've got thoughts on this. This is the handheld AI, and I don't want to spoil too much, Gabe. I'll let you kind of lead, but it was a handheld AI that was supposed to basically
kill the smartphone.
Yeah, and do this whole AI component. And I can't believe we haven't talked about this, but there's a popular reviewer. His username is MKBHD, millions of subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably seen his videos.
Yes.
He films in 8K, so why would you not? But he's been on a tear reviewing these often AI integrated products and saying this is absolute garbage, right? And then he kills the product. So he kind of has a reputation going for him the past few weeks. But what they found with this Rabbit AI, I don't know if you saw this part, Gabe, is it runs on Android. So people are basically turning that Android, I think it's called an APK. I may be wrong, but taking that, I don't want to call it an operating system if it's an app, but they're taking the app that this Rabbit is based off of, and they're just straight up running it on their Android phones. And now people are like,
interesting.
Why do we need this Rabbit if we just lost another sponsor, by the way.
Seriously, poor Rabbit.
If you can not only A, run the app on your phone, but B, we all have smartphones. Why do we need a new device that does what we
Well, that's the thing, is this was supposed to get people away from staring at their smartphone screen all day, every day, which honestly isn't a bad goal. We all spend way too much time looking at our phones. But it's when I first saw it launching and people were talking about it, I think it was just earlier this year. It was just a few months ago. It was like, is this going to kill the smartphone? So people, it's immediately they have to turn up the contrast like all the way to 11, just to make the sensational comment versus actually thinking about what's a transition of technology going to be. It's very rare that these things just flip the switch and we move from one thing to the other.
And on that note,
yes,
optimizing content for AI. I love how we have like these side quests. We lose a sponsor, we trash talk a product or Yelp or whatever it may be, but that's what we do.
Hey, it's a free flowing conversation, man.
Optimizing content. One of the big things here is with SEO is keywords. What keywords are you using, on your website to describe your business, your product, your whatever you're doing? And one of the big things I think we should be focusing on is using long tail keywords. So I used the example a few minutes ago of like top internet provider in my area. Cool. What's the best internet provider near me? That doesn't mean anything to AI, right? But now what if I change my keywords to match the query of what's the best internet provider for me when I'm gaming and working from home? I think that's a much different story, and I'm going to get very different results than best internet near me.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And to be really specific about how a marketer would want to take advantage of that, you literally need to put content on your website that talks about how you are the best internet service provider for gamers and work from homers. And ideally have that content in multiple ways. Obviously blog posts and things like that, FAQs, and video content, which I know is another one that we wanted to talk about today, Zach. Having those answers outlined in multimodal, to use another one of our fancy words that we love to use every once in a while, it's super important because then as that search is happening and as those AI results are coming back, it's going to be pulling it all from these different places and you're going to be more of an authority around that topic. So you bring up a great point. It's what question is being asked and what content do I need to create to answer that question and answer that question very specifically so that I do rank very high. Again, whether it's traditional SEO or SGE.
I think that's a great call out, Gabe. And I'm very interested to see where we go next with not only SEO, but AI, especially with Google, Microsoft, and even Apple, as I mentioned, bringing this into their core products. And I'm here for it. I really want to see, what changes are in the pipeline and how we as marketers can adapt our websites or advertising strategies, everything we do with these new technologies.
Well, I'm here for it too, because ultimately this should result in a better experience for the consumer. And if we are more thoughtful about how we're answering questions that people would want to know as they're engaging with our business, that's ultimately a good thing for the consumer and hopefully will be a good thing for the other companies that are built up around this infrastructure. But I've talked about this book before, Zach, and I really like this book. It's one of my favorite ones I've read in a while. It was called They Ask You Answer. And the whole premise behind the book is your customers, what questions are your customers asking? And how can you create content that answers those questions? It seems like a very simple thing, but most people don't do that. When they put together content, that talks about their product or maybe goes through the technical specs or things like that, right, of the actual product or solution, but they don't talk about how we're going to solve the problem that the customer ultimately wants to solve. And that to me is why this whole discussion around AI and search changing, I think, is really interesting, because if we can just create content that actually answers the questions that our customers want answered, that's a win for everybody, including the consumer and hopefully the business who makes the effort to create that level of content.
I agree, Gabe. I think that's a great way to look at this.
Yeah, see, there we go. So everybody just go off and create a bunch of helpful content. But I do want to add just again to be kind of specific around what we should be doing here. On the video side, Zach and I talked about this a little bit last week. So we record this podcast as a video. We upload that video to YouTube. With Gemini AI, I did it right that time, you can get summaries of that video. So now what we're doing is we're creating summary written content from the video that we've uploaded. It takes a very short period of time, like a few minutes. And now we have written content that speaks to this video also. So now I've taken one piece of content and made it two. And I could very easily take that and make it 3 or 4 pieces of content by just having Gemini rewrite it for a LinkedIn post or a social media, a Facebook or Instagram post or whatever. But all of a sudden I'm able to have this content used in multiple ways. And that's what gets me excited about leveraging this type of technology for making better content and making content that's going to be seen in multiple ways.
I'm all about the omnichannel approach. 2 years ago, this podcast was, I think we started just on like one platform and then we expanded to multiple, podcast platforms. And now, to Gabe's point, we've got the blog. Gabe posts on LinkedIn. I try to engage on LinkedIn. I'm very, I'm not on LinkedIn as much, but again, Gabe, you mentioned it takes minutes to do, and you mentioned again, another minute and you can have another platform. So I think this is a great use case. It's helping us take original content and distribute it across different channels.
Yes, that's the bit. It's distributing it across multiple channels. And as you distribute that content across multiple channels, to go back to the start of this conversation, your company or whoever is going to be seen as more of an expert, and it's going to be more likely that you're ranked in some of these AI search results or other results. And that's why I think it's so important to, again, don't wait for the end game here to start doing some of these things. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Google search. We know it's probably going to change, and we know AI and the AI results are going to probably have a big impact there. How exactly Google is going to monetize that and Bing is going to monetize that, or Microsoft, I should say, who the heck knows? But what we do know is if you have higher quality content and you make that available in multiple places, you're going to be in a much better position regardless of how this goes. I don't see any downside there, Zach.
Neither do I. I think this is a great conversation, Gabe, talking about why SEO is not actually dying and and how AI is coming into play. I told you a couple episodes ago, I'm not like, this what I think I said AI bro, like, obsessed with AI, but the reality is we're seeing it being brought into different parts of our lives, whether we want it to or not. Like, you may not use AI, but if you're using Google, well, there's the AI now. It's part of your life. So I think it's going to become more personal. We talked about Siri. I think that's a great one. Or for everyone with an Android phone, I don't know what AI capabilities. I mean, the Gemini app. Come on, there it is.
There you go.
Or if you have the Rabbit for some reason, you've wasted $200 on that. So. Yeah, this is a good episode. I enjoyed this. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. As Gabe mentioned, we do have the blog now, so be sure to connect with Gabe and myself on LinkedIn to grab a link to that blog. And you can also subscribe to the email, so you can get the latest podcast episodes right into your inbox as well. And I think it's a great way that Gabe's leveraging some of these new technologies to, again, distribute content on multiple channels, something every marketer should be considering. And Gabe, I really want to focus one more time on this. Is you mentioned this is only taking minutes to do. This isn't days, hours of work you're doing. Like, this is a couple clicks and here we are. I think that's important to stress, is how easy and how quickly this AI utilization has made this process.
Yeah, for sure. It's wild. I mean, just to be able to take that YouTube link, copy and paste it in, get that quick summary, and then be able to ask some questions of it, really cool. And as you said, Zach, it took me probably 10 minutes the first time because I needed to work on the prompts a little bit. But now that I have the prompts down, it's incredibly fast. And then it's pretty much copy paste, maybe change out a few things that, I might have said differently versus, how AI generated it, and move on with my life. But being able to quickly generate those pieces of content and hopefully create something that's beneficial for somebody is really, really cool, and to make it not a huge time suck. We do have day jobs, Zach.
Yeah, believe it or not. No, I was going to say you're giving away all of our secrets, but that's exactly what we're here to do.
I want more people doing this stuff, and it's being able to leverage the tools that are available is something that hopefully people get from listening to these discussions.
Well, Gabe, this, again, fantastic episode today. I feel like I have to watch Hot Rod tonight now that we talked about that. I mean, at least we didn't talk about the usual topics, which we all know. But again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the blog. Subscribe to that email list as well to get the latest content right to your inbox.